guys, welcome back to my podcast called Unfinished Business. In this podcast I'm going to talk about crimes, killers and conspiracy theories. It's called Unfinished Business because the cases may be closed, however the questions and the curiosity definitely aren't. I've just got two quick disclaimers before I do start this episode. My first disclaimer is at some points in this podcast I'm going to be using graphic and gory details, so if that's not something that you want to listen to, then I suggest you click off now. For my second disclaimer, I do research all of my information, however some of the things that I may say may be opinionated and I may have an opinionated sentence that is not meant to offend or harm anybody. Remember, that is just my opinion. This one is going to be a long one, so without doubt, let's pour it and get into it. Just another thing I want to say before I start this episode, if you are watching the video version, then you will see me looking at my phone a lot. That's just where I write my notes, and I do want to get all of the information as accurate as possible. So if I'm looking at it for most of this episode, it's because there's a lot of information to retain. However, today this episode will be on Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez is one of the most prolific and brutal serial killers in history. He killed at least 13 people from 1984 to 1985. Ramirez was born on the 29th of October in 1960, El Paso, Texas. Ramirez was the youngest of 5 children in an immigrant Mexican household. In Ramirez's early life, he suffered a few injuries which may have impacted the way that his behaviours developed as he grew older. When Ramirez was 2 years old, a dresser fell on top of him, causing him to have a laceration in his head, knocking him out, and he had to get 30 stitches. When Ramirez was 5 years old, Ramirez was knocked out by a swing in a park, which then again caused him to pass out. This significant head injury caused him to have epileptic seizures, and these remained until he was a teenager. Psychiatrists and researchers have extensively studied Ramirez's injuries. The repeated head trauma to his prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe led to the development of epilepsy. Experts and researchers also say that they believe that the neurological damage that he faced, combined with his highly abusive and chaotic upbringing, impaired his emotional regulation, impulse control and judgment as Ramirez grew older. Ramirez's father was reported to be a heavy drinker. He was also reported to be abusive. He had a severe drinking problem and a history of explosive anger. This resulted in Ramirez and other family members being physically abused, constantly at the risk of harm and abuse. Ramirez had a strange relationship with his father. He grew up in a household of abuse and instability. This caused Ramirez to start drinking and smoking at just the age of 10. Ramirez's mother was also emotionally unavailable. His household was shaped to be in constant fear and dysfunction. Imagine being 10 years old, going through the pain of being epileptic, suffering from seizures, your mum being emotionally unavailable so you can't really talk to her about your problems, and your dad being a heavy drinker and abusive. You're having to smoke and drink to get through all of it. Around this age, Ramirez started to become deeply attached to his cousin Miguel. Miguel was a war veteran and he served in Vietnam. He also had PTSD and schizophrenia. Ramirez watched and enjoyed seeing his cousin Miguel commit violent acts. Miguel taught him military-style killing techniques such as throat slashing and stealth attacks. Miguel would constantly brag to Ramirez about his war crimes. They would smoke marijuana together as Miguel told Ramirez about the torture and mutilation that he inflicted on several Vietnamese women. When Ramirez was 12 years old, Miguel showed him graphic pictures of Vietnamese women who he had allegedly raped, tortured and killed. This heavily influenced Ramirez's development of sadistic tendencies. The following year, Ramirez was a witness to his cousin's fatal shooting of his wife during an argument. A few months later, Ramirez moved in with his sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. Roberto was known as a peeping Tom, and he would take Ramirez on his after-dark acts. In 1977, Ramirez's cousin Miguel was released from Texas State Mental Hospital after being found not guilty of his wife Jessie's murder by the reason of insanity. Around the time of Miguel's release, Ramirez started breaking into homes. He was frequently skipping his classes in school and spending a lot of time wandering his local cemeteries. Ramirez started experiencing with high-class drugs such as LSD and cocaine. Now we're moving on from Ramirez's childhood. This is moving on to his adolescence. During Ramirez's adolescence, this is when the red flags in his behaviour started to flag up and spark. Ramirez would start to stalk and torture animals. Ramirez was also fascinated with arson and fire. His fascination with fire and destruction links to the desires for power and control. This may link to his later sadistic tendencies. Ramirez would often set fires to things. When Ramirez was just 15 years old, he was working in his local Holiday Inn as a busboy and a janitor. He was later fired from this job as Ramirez was using the key card to stalk and rob hotel patrons. Ramirez even broke into one customer's room and tried to sexually assault her, attempting to rape her. After this, he was caught and beat by her husband. At the end of Ramirez's teenage years in El Paso, he started to frequently consume horror media. This caused him to develop a strong, obsessive interest in Satanism and the occult. Ramirez seen this occult as a surrogate. It was his surrogate for stability. He would use it to rationalise and justify his growing violent urgencies and his quickly deteriorating morals. At school, Ramirez wasn't pointed out to be anything special. He definitely wasn't a star student. Ramirez had failed multiple attempts to his 9th grade, and he dropped out, leaving high school entirely before graduating. At his school, his former teachers and classmates reported that he was known for truancy, and he was being bullied quite frequently. He also struggled academically. He only did good in one subject, which was physical education. After Ramirez dropped out of school, he had moved to the Los Angeles area. In this area, he carried on committing petty crimes such as burglary and even voyeuristic exploits in order to fund his habits such as drugs. Ramirez was briefly imprisoned for stealing a car. At this point, his drug problem was worsening as he was at first snorting cocaine and now he's injecting it. We're now going to move on to Ramirez's first known murder. Ramirez's first known murder was a girl who was 9 years old. Her name was Mei Lung. He killed her on April 10th, 1984 in San Francisco. Mei Lung was his first known victim outside of the Night Stalker murders. This was in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. Mei Lung was raped and stabbed to death in the basement of her building. Ramirez even decided to take it a step further and hang her from her pipe. This crime isn't initially identified as being part of his spree, as his case went cold for a very long time. In 2009, his DNA matched a sample obtained at another crime scene and they connected him to Mei Lung's murder. At this point, this is when Ramirez's Night Stalker spree begins. His Night Stalker spree began 2 months after his first murder. This spree began on June 28, 1984. He murdered a 79-year-old woman named Jenny Vinkau in the suburb of Los Angeles. Ramirez stabbed her repeatedly, slashing her throat, almost decapitating her. Her head was hanging off her neck. Once Ramirez had brutally killed her, he raped her. His fingerprints were found on the window screen he removed in order to access the apartment. But at this time, computerized systems weren't up to notch. They wasn't able to match the DNA. At this point, computerized systems weren't fully developed, so they weren't able to match the fingerprint to Ramirez. They hadn't been developed properly yet. 2 separate occasions in February 1985, Ramirez abducted 2 girls, aged 6 and 9. Ramirez sexually assaulted them and then freed them. This is when his serial murders began. On March 17th, 1985, he attacked a 22-year-old woman named Maria Hernandez outside of her home in Rosemead, California. He shot her in her face, but she survived. The bullet ricocheted off a set of keys. He did kill her roommate by shooting her in the face. Later that day, he pulled a woman from her car and shot her fatally. However, the police had matched the bullet casings from both of the scenes. The attacks provided the authorities of their first description for Ramirez, a man with long hair, rotting teeth and bulging eyes. The media coverage fueled panic in the community. At this point, the community is hearing about so many attacks. Young girls, older ladies, and just anyone of any age is at risk of being attacked at this point. People are being raped, people are being sexually assaulted and shot. A few days later, Ramirez abducted an 8-year-old girl, raped and killed her. March 27th, 1985, Ramirez had entered a room he had previously burglarised. He fatally shot a 64-year-old man whilst he was sleeping. His name was Vincent Charles Zazar. His wife, Maxine Lavinia Zazar, aged 44, woke up from the gunshot sound. Ramirez beat her, bound her, and searched the room for valuables. Maxine escaped her binds and grabbed a gun. The gun, however, was not loaded. Ramirez had shot her 3 times in the head, then grabbed her, gouged out her eyes, put them in a jewellery box and left. She'd been stabbed all over her body and had a T-shaped carved into her breast. The police once again matched these bullet casings to the earlier attacks, and now they're suspecting the work of a serial killer. Ramirez had also left a footprint of the scene of the March 27th murders. He'd been wearing a brand of shoes which had only just launched in the United States, and only 1 pair had been sold in the area. The police had created a composite sketch based on the store owner's description. Ramirez now developed his igniting crimes by quickly getting rid and dispatching of the male victims so that he can spend more time brutalising women. He was attacking and raping children and setting them free. He was attacking and raping women yet letting them live. He just wanted to cause pain. He just wanted to inflict pain onto women. That was his main goal. Ramirez had developed a pattern, breaking into homes, binding them, finding valuables, maybe raping them, but killing them. On March 14th, 1985, he broke into Bill and Lillian Doy's home. This was in Monterey Park. He shot Doy in the face and beat him. He bound Lillian and searched their home for valuables, then raped Lillian, and Bill died in the hospital from his injuries. On March 29th, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Monrovia, California. He broke into Manel and Florence Lang's home. He attacked Lang with a hammer, binding her in the bedroom. He then bound and attacked Belle. He used Belle's lipstick to draw a pentagram on her body. He also drew pentagrams on the walls of both of their bedrooms after raping her. The women were found alive 2 days later, however Belle died due to her injuries. May 30th, 1985, Ramirez drove the stolen car to Burbank, breaking and entering into another home, Carol's home. He bound her and her son, who was 11. He made her son point out the valuables and raped her. He bound them together and left. On July 2nd, 1985, he drove the car down to Arcadia, California. He drove the car to Mary Louise Cannon's home. He knocked her out with a lamp, stabbed her with a knife from her kitchen, and Mary was found dead. We're getting deep into Ramirez's spree, and it's not nearly over yet. This is just showing his satanic and sadistic tendencies and his techniques. On July 5th, 1985, Ramirez went to Sierra Madre in California, where he attacked Whitney Bennett. She was 16. He attacked her with an iron while she was sleeping, attempted to strangle her with the telephone cord. The cord snapped and she began to breathe, but Ramirez then fled. However, Bennett did survive. July 7th, 1985, Ramirez tells his victim to swear on Satan. Ramirez broke into Joyce Lucielle Nelson's home in Monterey Park. He burglarized her home, beat her to death, yet he left a shoe print on her face. He then entered Sophie Dickman's home, handcuffing her at gunpoint, attempting to rape her, stealing her jewelry, and then tells her to swear on Satan that he stole everything of value in her home. On July 20th, 1985, Ramirez had brought a machete. He drove a different stolen vehicle to Glendale, California. He's now entered Layla and Maxon Niding's home. He kills them both with the machete and the gun, burglarized their home. He then drove to Sun Valley, breaking into the Novath home, fatally shooting China Rong Novath, raping and beating some kid Novath, binding their 8-year-old son, forcing some kid to point out all of their valuables in the home, forcing her once again to swear on Satan that she isn't hiding any money in her home. August 6th, 1985. Ramirez had broken into Chris and Virginia Peterson's home, shooting Virginia in the face and shooting Chris in the neck. He tried to flee the scene, however Chris fights back. Ramirez still managed to escape, however they both survived. August 8th, 1985, Ramirez now left Los Angeles and he's in the San Francisco Bay Area. He then broke into Peter and Barbara Pan's home. He shot Peter in the head and then beat and raped Barbara before fatally shooting her. He's used lipstick to then draw a pentagram and write Jack the Knife on a bedroom wall. August 25th, 1985, Ramirez drove to Mission Viejo in a stolen orange Toyota. James Romero Jr.'s 13-year-old son heard Ramirez outside of his home. Juniors then woke up his parents. Ramirez has fled the scene, however the family caught a glimpse of the colour and the license plate of the stolen car. Ramirez then broke into Bill Kahn and Inez Erickson's home. He shot Khan 3 times in the head and tells Erickson he's the Night Stalker and that she must swear to love Satan. After raping her, he tells her, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." Erickson later gives officials a description of Ramirez and they're able to find the stolen car in Los Angeles. There was a single fingerprint left on a mirror which matched Ramirez's fingerprint. "We know who you are now and soon everyone else will," officials say when releasing a 1984 mugshot of his. "There'll be no place you can hide." Now we're going to move on to when Ramirez is getting caught. August 30th to 31st, 1985. Ramirez had took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother. He had returned to California the next morning and his mugshot is all over the newspapers. When he notices, he attempts to carjack a woman's vehicle, but a group of bystanders pursue him. One manages to hit Ramirez in the head and they pin him down until the police arrive. In July 1988, it was Ramirez's first court appearance. It was his jury selection for his trial that began on July the 22nd. At Ramirez's first court appearance, he stood up and yelled, "Hail Satan," and he had a pentagram on his hand. August 14th, 1988. Ramirez's trial is delayed because one of the jurors is a no-show. The juror Phyllis Singletree is later found shot and killed in her apartment. The jury wonders if Ramirez is behind her death, but it's later determined that her boyfriend killed her and then committed suicide. On September 20th, 1989, Ramirez is now convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. This puts Ramirez on death row. On June 7th, 2013, Ramirez had died, aged 53, of health complications at Marine General Hospital in Green Bay, California. So Ramirez did die. However, he didn't die at the hands of death row. He didn't die by lethal injection. He died from health complications in a hospital. Now I'm going to go into some weird things about Ramirez's murders. Ramirez didn't immediately leave his victims' homes after killing them. Instead, he'd use the opportunity to have a snack. He stayed in their kitchens and helped himself to their food. After he attacked the sisters Mabel Bell and Florence Lang, he remained in their home to eat fruit and drink Mountain Dew. Both were still alive at the time, although Bell later died of her injuries. Why would you attempt to kill 2 people? One of them died, but why would you do that? And then just think, oh yeah, I'm going to go to their kitchen and I'm going to have some Mountain Dew and a snack. That is just so disrespectful. That's disgusting and disrespectful. All of the cases that I'm going to do are disgusting, but this one especially is crazy. We're going to go into some of the evidence which was held against Ramirez. There wasn't just his fingerprints, but there was the rare shoes. The rare shoes were the Avia 440s, and the impressions were found at multiple crime scenes. Some of the murders that Ramirez had committed were committed with the same firearm, which the casings were tested by professionals and investigators. The police also recovered jewellery and other items which had been taken from victims' homes, some of which were connected directly to Ramirez. There was also biological evidence from the rape kits of his victims. These testings strengthened the connection due to undeveloped technology in 1980, so they tested them later and they just connected it to his murder. But there was also a distinctive pattern across his murders, such as the time invasion, the sexual assaults, the multiple weapons, the satanic references and symbols left at some of the scenes, like the pentagrams and the writing on the walls and all of that kind of stuff. I'm guessing he proved his satanic tendencies either by speaking in a satanic manner to maybe an official or a professional, or the yelling in court. What do psychologists say about Ramirez? Well, they say that Ramirez fits the profile of a highly impulsive, sadistic psychopath with no regard for human life. So Ramirez was a psychopath. Was this because of his childhood? Maybe, maybe not. It still doesn't excuse anything that he did, justify any of his actions. However, it does add a bit of context to why Ramirez was so messed up. Why he did what he did, why he was the way he was. The drug use, the unstable home, the beatings, the starting of drinking and smoking at the age of 10, being shown graphic images of women arson, stalking and torturing animals. It all kind of weighs up. It all kind of weighs up to what you'd expect a psychopath to be doing, what upbringing you would expect a psychopath to have if that's the way that they are. Ramirez was quite difficult to catch for the police. This is because Ramirez attacked randomly. There wasn't any pattern in the times that he was attacking. Obviously it was at night time, but there wasn't like, oh, he's attacking every 3 days, oh, he's attacking every 4 days. It was just random attacks, and the victims weren't in one specific age range. Ramirez was killing from 6-year-olds, from children to elderly people, to a 79-year-old woman. There wasn't really any specific type of woman or any specific type of victim he was going for, because he also was attacking and killing men. It wasn't just that, but Ramirez was using different weapons. He was using guns, he was using knives, blunt objects, strangulation. Remember, he used the machete. He was trying to strangle people with telephone cords. There wasn't anything specific about the method he was using to kill people either. He also travelled frequently. He was killing in different locations. It wasn't all in the same area. It was different locations. This made it hard for professionals to be able to establish a pattern in Ramirez's killings. Ramirez also blended the elements of an organised and a disorganised killer. Due to the way he was killing, the times he was killing, how he was killing, it was all unpredictable. He was an unpredictable threat. Unlike most serial killers, Ramirez didn't have a specific victim type, which made it hard to profile Ramirez. Ramirez was highly influenced by his cousin Miguel. This shows us how social learning can link with sadism. Ramirez's random and brutal nature caused Ramirez to become one of the most brutal and unpredictable serial killers in history. Ramirez is a textbook example of violence, extreme sadism and psychopathy. This proves to us that early exposure to brutality can create a monster. Thank you for watching my episode on the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez. I know that some of these episodes aren't probably in the way that you want them to be, or like in detail as you want them to be, but I'm still kind of finding my way with these podcasts, as well as trying to be respectful as well, because real people and real feelings are involved in these cases. They aren't just stories. So yeah, and I will see you again next Tuesday at 5 p.m.